Welcome, Motenta people. She played the role of the sweet, naive Melanie, but in reality, she was a fighter who battled a flawed Hollywood studio system, helping to reshape the industry for good. Did Olivia de Havilland hate her sister, Joan Fontaine? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Motenta's channel. Olivia de Havilland, the last star of the Golden Age. One of the last surviving examples of Hollywood's Golden Age was the Gone with the Wind movie legend, Olivia de Havilland, who passed away at age 104. She was also the oldest living Oscar winner at the time of her passing. She developed a reputation for grace and dramatic versatility along the way. However, de Havilland's most significant contribution to Hollywood history is not found on film, but rather in the less glamorous rulings of California as a result of her hazardous 1943 choice to fight her employers at Warner Brothers. What made her do that? What other battles did she fight, and how did she change Hollywood culture? Let's find out in this video. On July 1, 1916, Olivia Mary de Havilland was born in Tokyo, Japan. She was the oldest child of lawyer Walter de Havilland and actress Lillian Augusta Roos, better known by her stage name, Lillian Fontaine. De Havilland was estranged from Joan Fontaine, her younger sister, for more than 8 decades, allegedly because of their shared professional rivalry. Despite the fact that she was born in Tokyo, she had spent much of her childhood in Northern California, and there she was noticed by the Austrian director Max Reinhardt, who cast her in his 1935 production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. De Havilland had to have the court's permission to sign her first conventional 7-year contract, because she was a child when she did so with Warner Brothers in 1936. Although de Havilland's performance in Gone with the Wind is today arguably her most famous role, neither was it her first significant commercial hit or an Oscar winner. She first gained fame in swashbuckling action movies, appearing in 8 of them with Errol Flynn, including their first collaboration, Captain Blood. Their compatibility was inevitable, and rumors of their love relationship ensued. De Havilland insisted constantly that they were just friends, and nothing more supported by the fact that Flynn was married. However, she couldn't deny the mutual attraction, and even Flynn also confessed his love for her in his 1959 autobiography. So did the rumors of her romance with one of the hottest male action stars of the day hurt de Havilland's career? The answer is obviously no. She became more well-known throughout the 1930s as a result of her appearances in hit movies, like It's Love I'm After and Gold Is Where You Find It. In fact, her 1938 performance as Maid Marian, opposite Flynn in The Adventures of Robin Hood, was a career turning point. All of these movies were produced by Warner Brothers, a company with which de Havilland had a contract. In those days, Hollywood was ruled by the studio system, and performers hardly ever appeared in pictures outside of the studio with whom they had a contract. However, the majority of an actor's films would be made with one studio. Loans and trades might be made, such as one actor making a single film with a different studio in exchange, perhaps for that studio's big star in a film. When de Havilland discovered that David O. Selznick was getting ready to direct Gone with the Wind for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, she faced a challenge. De Havilland was immensely interested in playing Melanie Hamilton after reading the well-known book by Margaret Mitchell. She had no yearning for the glamorous character of Scarlett O'Hara, unlike the majority of actors. Given that the production wasn't actually happening at her studio, she didn't seem to have a good chance of landing the part she wanted to play. But it turned out that the movie's director shared her desire for the part. But do you know what's more interesting? It's the way she got that role. In an interview with the Academy of Achievement in 2006, she narrated the story of the unauthorized call from George Cukor that led her to her audition. "Would you agree to do something extremely illegal?" Cukor queried. "What would that be?" she asked. "You have a deal with Warner Brothers," she said. "Would you come to the studio covertly and without telling anyone, even though we have no authority to ask you to? We will lead you to the required doorway, which is a private entrance. You will be met there by someone who will unlock the door, let you inside, and then accompany you to my office, where you will read some lines and play the role of Melanie." "Yes," de Havilland responded. "I'd be happy to conduct this super-secretive act." Sounds quite simple, right? But in actuality, it was tricky. Her undercover audition on the MGM lot was just the beginning of the trick. After a second private audition, which Cukor and Selznick both liked, she was offered the position. If she wanted it and could get away from Warner Brothers, it was hers. But herein was the problem. Jack Warner, the head of the studio, was fiercely against lending her out. De Havilland then took control of her career, something she would do again in the future. To Warner's wife, she spoke without his knowledge. De Havilland expressed to Ann Warner how much she wanted to play Melanie during their conversation over tea. Warner consented to assist, and she managed to convince her husband to let her lend De Havilland to MGM in exchange for a photo with their leading man, James Stewart. Even though Gone with the Wind was starting to have a terrible rap in Hollywood, De Havilland was overjoyed. De Havilland told The Independent that the film was taking so long to complete that insiders were sick of it before it was ever launched. You have to keep in mind that Scarlett O'Hara was sought after for 3 years. Then came all the set modifications and 3 distinct directors. Long before it was finished, the press and all of Hollywood had grown weary of Gone with the Wind and were sure it would be a total failure. But I was not. I had faith in it. She made the right decision. The movie was a huge hit, shattering all prior box office records and winning an incredible 10 Oscars. De Havilland hoped that she would win one of those Oscars. Despite the fact that most people thought she played a prominent role, she was a nominee for Best Supporting Actress. She was listed as a supporting actress in order to be in the hunt for a different award, since no one wanted to set her against Vivien Leigh as Scarlett O'Hara, who seemed to be a lock for the role and who did win Best Actress. She ultimately lost to her co-star Hattie McDaniel, who made history by becoming the first African American to win an Academy Award. But she didn't take offense to her co-momentous star's victory. De Havilland claimed that the people couldn't have voted for her in good conscience because she wasn't a supporting actress. Thus, there was no shame in losing. There would be other opportunities for De Havilland to win an Oscar, but not with this nomination. That Oscar quest was sadly disappointing. Performing well in the 1941 film Hold Back the Dawn, De Havilland was a contender for Best Actress. She not only lost, but her sister Joan Fontaine won the award for her performance in Suspicion, which is the only Oscar-winning performance in an Alfred Hitchcock movie. The sisters were gathered around a table when Fontaine's name was declared the winner. Their relationship began to break down that evening. However, Oscar was not the cause of their enmity. Their sibling rivalry, which had actually started years before, was her biggest battle. This persistent rivalry was sparked when, at the age of 102, she filed a lawsuit against FX for using her identity without permission in the 2017 television series Feud, Betty and Joan. But in 2019, the Supreme Court declined to take up her case. So, what was the background story then? Actually, when their mother remarried after their father abandoned the family, Fontaine quickly cozied up to the new stepfather, George Fontaine, whom de Havilland never liked. Although the sisters' conflict was legendary, de Havilland hardly ever contributed to the gossip about the silver screen. She was highly private about her sister, choosing to avoid addressing questions about their bond. Fontaine wasn't so cautious. Whenever she was questioned, she was open and honest about how they felt. That included her famous Oscar-winning line, "If I die first, she'll undoubtedly be enraged because I beat her to it." Soon enough, de Havilland would surpass her sister and take home her own Oscar. But first, she fought and defeated the Hollywood studio system. De Havilland became more selective about the roles she would accept as she evolved from a promising young performer into a legend in a series of action-packed costume dramas with Flynn and later an iconic Melanie Hamilton in Gone with the Wind. Jack L. Warner, the studio's tyrannical production director, whom she dubbed Jack the Warden, would suspend her without pay and add the duration of the suspension to her existing contract each time she declined one. Bette Davis and James Cagney, two gifted but temperamental actors who rejected down assembly line roles they regarded were beneath them, had to pay Warner a similar price. De Havilland, though, was the one who ultimately made the decision to take action. She attempted to turn down the ingenue roles, but in the studio system, turning down a role resulted in a suspension during which you were completely prohibited from working. When her 7-year contract with the studio expired in 1943, giving her the option to leave, she was told that an additional 6 months had been added to the agreement to make up for all her suspensions. De Havilland filed a lawsuit under an obscure state anti-peonage law, which prohibited any employer from enforcing a personal services contract for more than 7 years, on the advice of Martin Gang, a well-known Hollywood attorney. Trial and appellate courts both decided in favor of de Havilland, and agreed that 7 years meant 7 calendar years, not 7 years worth of working time that had already passed. The importance of de Havilland's legal success extended beyond her own career. It was one of the factors in the downfall of the Hollywood studio structure, which gave actors more freedom to choose the roles they wanted to play and to choose to work for a share of the earnings rather than a fixed salary. The decision was so significant that it earned the name de Havilland Law and received high appreciation from her fellow performers. What about the reaction of the studio? Obviously, they were furious, and as a result of her suit, they blacklisted her. For almost 2 years, she was out of the Hollywood industry. Despite her career's stagnation, de Havilland stayed active by participating in a USO tour and visiting soldiers in military hospitals, both domestically and internationally. De Havilland, meanwhile, turned down roles at 20th Century Fox and Paramount Pictures following a 2-year absence. She gloriously made a comeback to Hollywood. To Each His Own, produced by Paramount Pictures, was her first film after being put on the blacklist, and it won her first Best Actress Oscar. In addition to becoming an Oscar winner, de Havilland also made history by becoming one half of the only sibling duo to ever win an Academy Award for Best Leading Actor. To Each His Own marked the beginning of a streak of deeper, more challenging roles for her. Isn't it all she'd been longing for while restricted by Warner Brothers? She received another Oscar nomination for The Snake Pit, in which she starred and also performed in The Dark Mirror, both from 1948. The following year, when she won Best Actress for The Heiress, she would reach the heights once more. De Havilland never quite attained her former stardom, though, as the 1950s proceeded. In 1952, she left Hollywood for Paris and her marriage to Pierre Galante, the editor of the Paris Match magazine. But was it only the romance that drove the big life change? Probably not. As she told The Independent, she saw a shift in Hollywood and was willing to leave. In the early 1950s, Hollywood turned into a pretty dismal place. Clearly, television had brought an end to the golden age. Studios currently produce 10 to 25 films annually, as opposed to 100 in the 1930s. There was an atmosphere of impending doom and profound sadness. De Havilland got a fresh start with a change of scenery, but she didn't completely stop acting. Until 1988, when she played her final role in The Woman He Loved, a TV movie depicting King Edward VIII's abdication, she continued to make rare appearances in both film and television. Later in life, de Havilland recalled her memories with the same sneaky humor that had led her to suggest to Hal Kern, the film editor of Gone with the Wind, that she could perform the climatic first-act finale's retching better than Vivien Leigh, who played Scarlett O'Hara and didn't consider vomiting to be ladylike. De Havilland's frantic sounds can be heard on the finished soundtrack as a result of Kern's agreement. A post-World War II tea-time encounter with a smitten Kennedy, who had just returned from serving in the Navy in the Pacific, came to an interesting conclusion. Many years later, she would describe him as very silent in an interview with a British newspaper. She said, "Most of the talking was done by his acquaintances. He simply sat there and stared with those wide eyes. When it was time for them to leave, we were in the hallway when he opened the door with sheer zeal." But guess what? It was the door to the closet. All her old boxes of summer hats and tennis rackets fell on his head. Embarrassing, right? But Kennedy later invited her to dinner, but she declined, saying she needed to study her lines. Kennedy was shocked to see her dining that night at Romanoff's with a much older author, Ludwig Bemelmans. He questioned a pal, "Do you think that was me walking into the closet? Do you think that was the true cause?" While talking about her preferences regarding death in a 2005 interview with Vanity Fair, she said, "I would choose to live forever in excellent health, but if I must at some point leave this life, I would prefer to do so ensconced on a chaise lounge, perfumed, wearing a velvet gown and pearl earrings, with a flute of champagne beside me and having just discovered the answer to the last situation in a British cryptic crossword." And she really lived for more than 100 years like a warrior and not just an actor. Would it be wrong if we call her the Lioness of Hollywood, who not only fought for her rights, but also brought a positive change in Hollywood that was beneficial for all her fellow stars? If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Olivia de Havilland and Errol Flynn made a perfect match on screen, but Errol Flynn had a very different reputation in Hollywood. Why is Errol Flynn remembered for all the wrong reasons? You have to watch this video to find out.